Mr Speaker, we have no plans to change the Equality Act, as my honourable friend set out earlier. Through the new race engagement group being led by Baroness Lawrence, we will consider any such questions, such as the ones that he identifies.
Melody Old.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. After an appalling rape incident on the Fuller Street Bridge in my constituency, I was shocked to find that last year only 2.7% of recorded rapes in the UK resulted in a charge. What is the Minister doing to improve this charge rate and get justice for more survivors of this appalling crime?
I'm very sorry to hear of the case in my honourable friend's constituency, and it brings into sharp focus the need to tackle violence against women and girls and to ensure that our mission to halve violence against women and girls is delivered. The inheritance that we had from the Conservatives was shocking. Far too many women denied justice, cases never getting to court or victims being left to wait for years for justice. That's why the Lord Chancellor has made this a priority to take action to deliver justice for women.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, can I welcome in the gallery the Chairman of the State of the Great Hurl, the Parliament of Mongolia. Now we come to Alberto Costa. Prime Minister's questions.
Question number 1, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last night I spoke to President Zelensky to discuss progress that President Trump had made with Russia towards a ceasefire, and I took the opportunity to reaffirm our unwavering support to the people of Ukraine. Mr Speaker, I'm deeply concerned about the resumption of Israeli military action in Gaza. The images of parents carrying their children, young children, to hospitals have emerged over the last few days are truly shocking, alongside the sheer number of people who've been killed. And we will do all that we can to ensure the resumption of the ceasefire, to get the remaining hostages out and to get aid that's desperately needed in. Mr Speaker, the whole House will want to celebrate the extraordinary life of Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, the last known pilot of the Battle of Britain. The courage of his generation, the fearlessness, sense of duty and service secured our freedom, and we will never forget them. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Alberto.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Brain tumours kill more children and those under the age of 40 than any other cancer. Mr Speaker, from time to time, all of us get constituents in our surgeries that tell us stories which really get to us and twang on the heart. Mr Speaker, last Friday, Laura attended my Sharnford constituency. She told me of the tragic death of her 6-year-old, energetic, loving son, Talon, from a brain tumour. All that she asked, Mr Speaker, is that I raise this matter nationally, and I'm doing that now. But I'd like to go one step further. Would the Prime Minister agree to arrange a meeting for Laura and the brain tumour support group known as Angel Mums to meet with the relevant Healthcare Minister to discuss brain tumour research?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for doing what he was asked to do, which is raising this case here. The loss of a child is simply unbearable, and I think most of us, including myself, simply wouldn't know how we would be able to react. And I think the whole House will want to send its deepest condolences to Laura and to all of Talon's family and friends. I will happily make sure that the meeting that he requests takes place, so we can reassure that we are committed to supporting life-saving and life-improving research and doing all we can to improve how we prevent, detect, manage and treat cancer. Thank you.
Andrew Pex.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Like many people in Peterborough, I am passionate about tackling low pay and insecure work, especially for young people. Next month, many of my constituents will receive a welcome boost in their pay packets due to the increase in the national minimum wage to government. Can I thank the Prime Minister for ignoring the voices on the opposite benches who continue to oppose our plans to make work pay? And can I urge him to go further and faster in delivering our plan for change for working people?
Well,
Well, I thank him. He's a superb job for Peterborough, and we're proud that our Employment Rights Bill is tackling the cost of insecure work, and we're delivering that pay rise for 3 million of the lowest paid. We know the Leader of the Opposition opposes all that. She thinks the minimum wage is a burden and that maternity pay is excessive. It's the same old Tories. They opposed the minimum wage in the first place. They've learned absolutely nothing.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Beryl.
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor claimed that her budget was a once-in-a-Parliament reset. So why are we having an emergency budget next week?
Mr. Speaker, we have delivered record investment into this country, had 3 interest rates cut in a row, and wages are going up faster than prices, which is a massive cost of living boost. That's after only 8 months, after 14 years of absolute failure. What do they do? Interest rates 11%. Massive 22 million black hole in the economy. They crashed the economy. We're rebuilding Britain.
Mr. Speaker, he knows why we're having an emergency budget, because since the last one, since the Chancellor delivered her budget in October, growth is down, borrowing is up, and she has destroyed business confidence. Does the Prime Minister now regret raising taxes on business?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the OBR will present their numbers. There will be a spring statement next week. But, Mr. Speaker, she still hasn't. We've got record investment into this country. Interest rates have been cut, and she talks about national insurance. We had to fill the 22 billion black hole that they left. We've invested in the NHS, in schools and public services. We're pressing on with planning, with infrastructure and regulation. But I understand the Leader of the Opposition is straight talking, so perhaps she can help us with this. Is she going to reverse the next increase? If not, what's the point? If so, what other taxes is she raising to fill the hole? One way or the other?
You're in government.
Speaker, the only black hole is the one that he is digging. He's shown absolutely no regret, but everybody knows the Chancellor has made a mistake. That is why they're having an emergency budget. Later today, Conservatives will vote to exempt hospices, pharmacies and care providers from her national insurance rise. Will he, at the very least, support exempting these vulnerable services from his jobs tax?
Prime Minister.
I noticed she didn't say they're going to reverse the national insurance rises. It's exactly what she wants all the benefits, but they can't say how they're going to pay them. She carps from the sideline, but can't make her mind up whether she supports or doesn't support national insurance rises. We've made provision for hospices, we've made provisions for charities, but we had to secure the economy. We had to fill the £22 billion black hole that they disgracefully left.
Mr. Speaker, he hasn't made these provisions. He keeps talking about budget benefits. Unemployment is not a benefit. Businesses closing are not benefits. I asked him whether he would exempt hospices, even children's hospices, from the jobs tax. He did not answer that question. His MPs know that this could affect end-of-life care. So I will ask the same question again. Will he exempt hospices from paying his jobs tax?
Mr. Speaker, we've already invested £100 million for adult and children's hospices, an additional £26 million in funding through the Children's Hospices grant, but we can't get away with what we were doing in that budget, the root cause, which was fixing the economy they left so badly damaged, a £22 billion black hole. Perhaps you start the next question with an apology.
Mr. Speaker, I remember when he made... They want me to answer questions, then we can swap sides. I remember when he made that announcement. He's forgotten, because the money he's referring to for hospices is for buildings. It is not for the salaries hit by the jobs tax. As St Helena Hospice in Colchester said, we cannot use this funding for salaries, which is where we need urgent help. Why is the Prime Minister not listening to hospices?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've already set out the position in relation to hospices. She says that she wants to swap sides. I mean, heaven forbid. After 14 years of breaking everything, we're getting on with the job of fixing it, and all she can do is cart from the sidelines with absolutely no policy.
Mr. Speaker, winter fuel payments have been snatched. The jobs tax is hammering everyone from business to charities. The Chancellor promised a once-in-a-Parliament budget that she would not come back for more. And in that budget, she said there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax thresholds. Ahead of the emergency budget, will he repeat? Mr. Speaker, ahead of the emergency budget, will he repeat the commitment that she made?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she's got such prescriptive questions, she can't actually adapt them to the answers that I'm giving. I mean, Mr. Speaker, I think she now calls herself a Conservative realist. Well, I'm realistic about the Conservatives. The reality is they left open borders and she was the cheerleader. They crashed the economy, mortgages went through the roof, the NHS was left on its knees and they hollowed out the armed forces. This government has already delivered 2 million extra NHS appointments, 750 breakfast clubs, record returns of people who shouldn't be here, and a fully funded increase in our defence spending. That is the difference that a Labour government makes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A lady came to see me recently who needed help. She had a disability. It meant that her children have to help her cut up her food. They have to help her wash beneath the waist. They have to supervise her as she goes to the toilet. Under the Tory welfare system, we were able to get that lady on PIP. Under the Prime Minister's new proposed system, she will get zero. Nothing. And after 14 years of the Tory government, and many of us wanting to see the back of them, can the Prime Minister answer one question? What was the point if Labour are going to do this?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've lived with the impact of a disability in our family through my mother and brother all my life. I do understand the human impact of this, but the current system is morally and economically indefensible, and we're right to reform it, and nobody should be defending the broken status quo. We are proceeding on three principles: that if you can work, you should work. If you need help into work, the state should help you, not hinder you. And if you can never work, you must be supported and protected. They are the right principles, but we can't leave the current system as it is.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks on Ukraine and Gaza? And can I also pay tribute to Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway and all our heroes from the Battle of Britain? I know that members across this House will, like me, have heard from GPs, dentists, community pharmacists and care homes who are all deeply worried about the impact of the national insurance rise on the services they provide to patients. That's why the House of Lords passed a Liberal Democrat amendment to exempt NHS and care providers. That amendment comes before this House this afternoon, but we're hearing worrying reports that the Prime Minister will order Labour MPs to vote against it. Will the Prime Minister reassure this House and patients across the country that these reports are not true?
Prime Minister.
Can I start by pointing out that because of the changes we made at that budget, we were able to put record amounts of money into our National Health Service, and vitally important that we did so. And it isn't right to simply oppose the measures we had to take to raise the money and at the same time say as the honourable gentleman does, that he wants the benefits of the increase in funding for the NHS. The two can't sit together. We have already invested an additional £3.7 billion of funding into social care, including £880 million to increase the social care grant. So we are taking steps. But the basic point remains, which is we can't make the investment into the NHS if we don't raise the money. And you can't simply oppose any raising of money and at the same time welcome the money into the NHS.
Senator Davey.
By that reply, and I hope he and the Chancellor will think about taking money from the NHS ahead of the spring statement and reverse it. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to turn to the issue of illegal hair coursing. Criminal gangs are terrorising rural communities across our country, from Cambridgeshire to Devon, from Oxfordshire to Wiltshire. Men in balaclavas are threatening and abusing farmers as these criminals tear across their fields in 4x4s. Farmers are warning that it's only a matter of time before someone is killed. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that we must act urgently against this appalling criminality? And will he back our calls for a comprehensive rural crime strategy so we can not just stamp out hair coursing, but keep our rural communities safe from all crime?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising this important issue, and it is a matter of deep concern. We've already developing a rural crime strategy, but we'll happily work with him and others to develop it further.
Lawrence Turner.
Northfield are deeply concerned about the scourge of knife crime, and I pay tribute to the professionalism of West Midlands Police for their response to these horrendous attacks. But there are still 1,200 fewer police officers and PCSOs in the force than in 2010. A new bid has been submitted to the Home Office for 150 more officers. Will he look at this issue so that the police can do more to keep our streets secure and safe?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I join him in commending the West Midlands Police for keeping his community safe? We are doubling our investment to £200 million towards the recruitment of 13,000 neighbourhood police, giving every community a named officer to help tackle violent crime. And we're currently working through bids with forces to ensure that we do so, and I'll make sure he gets a meeting with the relevant policing minister to discuss.
Mr.
Speaker, we have a deeply unfair, unequal economic system where vast numbers of people are struggling, yet billionaires are getting richer and richer. Does the Prime Minister really think that the way to tackle this is to put the onus onto older people, children and now sick and disabled people, rather than on the shoulders of the super rich with a wealth tax, those people who could most easily afford to pay? And if the Prime Minister uses the phrase difficult choices in his answer, please will he specify difficult choices for whom?
Well, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do have a proportional tax system, and we have raised tax on the wealthiest under this government. But her advice would count for a bit more if their manifesto hadn't been a recipe for £80 billion of extra borrowing. That is to do exactly what Liz Truss did to the economy, and that doesn't help any of the people that she's claiming to support.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the government's ambitious growth plans for Oxford-Cambridge Arc, which promises to reverse years of decline and transform the eastern region by driving prosperity, creating jobs and delivering much-needed housing. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that the crowning achievement of this plan would be the establishment of a world-class theme park in Bedford Borough? It would transform our local economy, create thousands of new jobs and opportunities, and elevate Bedford as a national hub for leisure and tourism.
Prime Minister.
Well, he's right to raise this important project, which we are working for. And it's vital that we do unleash the potential of the Oxford-Cambridge corridor and, of course, Bedford by generating growth, jobs and opportunities. And we're doing that by speeding up the delivery of new infrastructure projects, slashing red tape and getting Britain building.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents have approached me about the inadequate treatment of young people's eating disorders. This year, despite a 13% increase in referrals, the majority of ICBs have cut real-term funding. Currently, as I've seen in my own family and my weekly surgeries, those who reach out for treatment are told, in effect, come back when you're thinner, increasing both the human and financial costs of treatment. Does the Prime Minister agree timely intervention is critical, and will he meet with me to discuss how we fund it?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Well, he's right. Too many people with eating disorders are not getting the treatment that they need. The NHS is expanding eating disorder treatment services with a focus on accessing treatment earlier and closer to home. And we're also providing access to specialist mental health professionals in every school, and I'll make sure that he's kept updated.
Paul Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour's flagship crime and policing bill is designed to tackle the rise in antisocial behaviour, theft and shoplifting that has occurred under the Tories. It grants police the power to confiscate disruptive off-road vehicles. This measure will tackle the scourge of off-road bikes in my constituency. Does the Prime Minister agree that we are the party of law and order and that we are fulfilling our commitments?
Mr. Speaker, it's totally unacceptable for anyone to feel intimidated or unsafe due to the actions of reckless and selfish individuals. Whatever the vehicle, our bill gives police forces stronger powers to seize them immediately and put a stop to antisocial behaviour. That's our plan for change in action, making our streets and communities safer.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years to get ready, they came into power with no plan to reform welfare. But now, in a panic because of their economic mismanagement, they're cutting benefits for disabled people without consulting them at all. It probably says in his folder that the High Court ruled the Conservatives' consultation was too short, but at least we consulted. They're not consulting at all. So will the Prime Minister explain why he is doing things to disabled people and not with them?
No, what it says in my folder is they had 14 years, including five with a majority of... They didn't need to consult, get on with it. They had a majority of 80 for the last 5 years. They're now carping on with some of their ideas. 14 years, and they didn't implement a single one. They simply broke the system. They're in no place to lecture other people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the charity Shelter, there are more homeless children in my city of Edinburgh than there are in the whole of Wales. That's an appalling legacy of 18 years of SNP government. Does the Prime Minister agree with me there should be no homeless children? And will he work with me, the Scottish Parliament and anyone who will listen to end child homelessness in Scotland?
Well, the situation he describes is an appalling indictment of the SNP record. The party opposite left record homelessness in England. The SNP record is equally shameful, a record number of children in temporary accommodation. Mr. Speaker, we're investing £1 billion to tackle homelessness, we're abolishing no-fault evictions and building 1.5 million new homes. Meanwhile, the SNP have cut their affordable housing budget. They've had the largest settlement since devolution. They've got the power, the money. Now it's time they started delivering.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, I received an email from Santander informing me that both the Bognor Regis and the Rustlington branches in my constituency are set to close, with 4 other bank branches shutting across the constituency in 2023 alone. The most vulnerable members of our society are being gradually cut off from essential banking services. Small cash-based businesses will also struggle to deposit their takings, faced with the added burden of travelling to Chichester or Worthing, making it even harder for them to operate. So what decisive action is the Prime Minister taking to guarantee that people and businesses in my constituency and across the country are not left without access to cash and vital banking services?
Mr. Speaker, we are rolling out 350 banking hubs across all communities, and I'll happily arrange for her to have a meeting with the Minister to discuss how that might affect her constituency.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Firstly, I welcome the Prime Minister's announcement of £200 million from the National Wealth Fund for the industrial future of Grangemouth. But today, I want to ask specifically about the workers facing redundancy. Given the assurances from the Prime Minister on the 18th of February and repeated by Starmer, the Scottish Labour leader, as recently as the 4th of March, can the Prime Minister confirm that the guarantee given on 18 months pay protection for all of those workers losing their jobs due to the Grangemouth refinery closure will be honoured, including those shared services workers, and say how the payment can be claimed by all those affected?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, Petroenius have said that every employee made redundant will get 18 months full pay. The Project Willow report that's come out today says how we can support a sustainable industrial future for Grangemouth, which is incredibly important, delivering jobs and economic growth. As he references, I've announced £200 million through the National Wealth Fund to secure the site's long-term future. And of course, that's backed by the £100 million Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal, which is training and the training guarantee to support workers into good jobs. They're all the actions that we were taking on this very, very important issue.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the House of Lords considers the Infected Blood Compensation Scheme regulations, which diverge from the proposals of the inquiry report and the government response. The regulations introduce new exclusions, treat victims inconsistently and downgrade some previously agreed awards, such as that to my constituent Owen Saville. Will the Prime Minister remember the promise made to victims like Owen and think again?
Well, the victims of this scandal have suffered unspeakably, and I'm pleased that at the budget we set aside the £11.8 billion to compensate them in relation to this appalling scandal. I would gently point out that the party opposite was committed rightly to this compensation but didn't provide a single penny in the column to pay for it. The Infected Blood Compensation Authority has been established and began to make payments last year. Over £1 billion interim payments have been made, and we do remain completely committed to cooperating with the inquiry and acting on its recommendations.
Elise Midgley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone is talking about Adolescence, the series by Knowsley's own Stephen Graham and Christine Tamarco. It highlights online male radicalisation and violence against girls. The creators of the show are calling for screenings in Parliament and schools to spark change. So will the Prime Minister back this campaign to counter toxic misogyny early and give young men the role models they deserve?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Yes, and at home we are watching Adolescence with our children. I've got a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, and it's a very, very good documentary to watch, or drama. This violence carried out by young men, influenced by what they see online, is a real problem. It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it. We are putting in specialist rape and sexual offences teams in every police force, doing work on the 999 calls. But this is also a matter of culture that I think it's important that across the whole House we tackle this emerging and growing problem.
Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal Democrats have long called for a UK-EU youth mobility scheme, and polling has repeatedly shown that the majority of Brits support this idea, including my constituents in Epsom and Ewell. A well-structured and controlled scheme would show that the government is serious about providing opportunities for young people and backing British business. So will the Prime Minister stop sitting on the fence and finally commit to a youth mobility scheme?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are working closely with our European colleagues and the EU in particular, and we are working to a reset of the relationship. We won't be returning to freedom of movement. I've made that repeatedly clear, but we're making good progress.
Orrin Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous government failed to properly support further and adult education over the last 14 years. And in contrast, the Prime Minister's personal commitment to technical qualifications has been encouraging. Last year's budget provided a welcome boost to some parts of the sector, but need and demand is outstripping available funding. Skills are crucial to the government meeting its missions to deliver economic growth, build 1.5 million homes, and to transition to a green economy. Can the Prime Minister provide reassurance that the funding model will be reviewed so that we won't see colleges having to turn people away who want to gain the skills that our country so desperately needs?
Prime Minister.
Well, she's right. Further education plays a critical role in giving young people the skills and confidence that they need, and of course the training we need for the future. We are investing £400 million on education for 16 to 19-year-olds this year, and our levy-funded growth and skills offer will create jobs in key industries, and I can assure her that the funding will deliver enough places for young people.
John Cooper.
Speaker, thank you. Large spending announcements for defence would make you think that Britain is marching us to war, but the MOD is bimbling along with procurement systems better designed for peacetime. Will the Prime Minister use his good offices to bring British industry into this fight, and quickly?
Prime Minister.
Yes, but they did leave a bit of a mess that we are clearing up, having hollowed out our armed forces and having not made the necessary investment that we needed in our defence. We've announced the largest sustained increase since the Cold War of 2.5% by 2027 and 3% in the next Parliament, subject to economic circumstances. So yes, we are getting on with the job and clearing up the mess that they left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency, Stratford and Bow, has the greatest number of high-rise buildings with dangerous cladding in the country. On Friday, I visited Stratford Fire Station. Our brilliant local firefighters told me that 77 high-rise buildings in Newham and 165 high-rise buildings in Tower Hamlets are covered in hazardous materials, many of them deemed unsafe. Thousands of my constituents have been calling for justice for years. Can the Prime Minister tell me what the government is doing to ensure that private developers are held to account for the dangerous cladding on the high-rises that they have built?
Prime Minister.
Well, she's right. Remediation has been far too slow, and everybody deserves a safe and secure home. We've signed a contract with 54 major developers who will pay for or fix over 1,700 buildings, and we're accelerating that progress. We will take tough action against those who evade their responsibilities. We will recover taxpayers' funds and make sure those responsible pay up and fix unsafe buildings quickly.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come to this chamber, Mr. Speaker, every week to ask sensible questions, and I expect sensible answers. But all I get is glazed expressions and waffle from the opposite benches. So Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Prime Minister a very simple question on behalf of all the net zero sceptics. If we became net zero tomorrow, by how much would it reduce the Earth's temperature by? Simple question.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, net zero is of course not easy, but it's a huge opportunity to boost our growth, our jobs and our economy. And so he knows my views on that. But you know, he complains that have better ideas if they stop fawning over Putin. And I understand the member for Clacton wants to be Prime Minister. He can't even lead a party that fits in the back of a taxi.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 in 5 disabled people in social housing and 1 in 3 disabled private renters live in inaccessible housing. One of my constituents with severe fibromyalgia and PTSD lives on a first-floor flat with no lift access. As we build the 1.5 million new homes that this country needs, will the Prime Minister ensure that they are built to be accessible and adaptable so disabled and older people can live independently for generations to come?
Prime Minister.
She's right. Everybody needs to be able to access a home that is suitable for them and meets their needs. The planning rules, Mr. Speaker, already mean councils must consider the needs of disabled people when planning new homes. We will go further, setting out our policies on accessible new homes very shortly, and we're boosting the Disabled Facilities Grant by £172 million, helping more people make vital improvements and live independent lives.
Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite Ukraine being the victim in Russia's illegal aggression,
President Zelensky has shown leadership to his people by committing to the US plans for a ceasefire. However, it's clear that Putin is playing for time and still carrying out daily attacks on Ukrainian people. So, Prime Minister, is now not the time to take those frozen Russian assets, to seize them, to give them to the Ukrainian people, to strengthen their hand at the negotiating table and to punish Russian aggression?
Minister.
Well, on both points, I spoke to President Zelensky last night following the discussions yesterday to discuss the way forward. On the wider question of the assets, look, it's complicated, but we're working with others to see what is possible, but it isn't straightforward.
Ewan Steinbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The release of Project Willow today is a step forward in securing good jobs and an industrial future for Grangemouth. However, the Government needs to work at pace to ensure the recommendations in Willow are acted upon. Can the Prime Minister outline what steps he will be taking to ensure barriers to a rapid transition at Grangemouth are removed and investment is progressed as quickly as possible?
Well, I'm very grateful for him for raising Grangemouth again the second time in this session, and that's because it's centrally important. He'll have heard what I had to say about the projects that we're looking at to ensure the long-term future of Grangemouth, the interim measures that are being taken, and, of course, the £200 million of the Wealth Fund that I announced just a few weeks ago.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister and I disagree about much. The family farm tax, the NI jobs tax, and the cut in winter fuel payments, but we surely agree that the common good is built on public order. Crossbows in the hands of killers cost lives. They cost the lives of 3 innocent women last year. Now, the previous government launched a consultation over a year ago on the regulation of crossbows, their sale and use, and we've heard nothing since. They are as powerful as guns, as silent as knives. Will the Prime Minister agree for one of his ministers to come to the House before Easter to give us a clear instruction about what the government intends to do before any more lives are lost?
Well, I thank him for raising this, and he's right to do so. It's a shocking issue, and the case he refers to is a truly shocking case. I think that's agreed across the House. We are working on this, and I'll make sure that he gets an update to ensure that he's across the detail of what we're doing.
Final question, Diane Abbott.
Most members of this House will be aware that the welfare system can be a nightmare to navigate and does indeed need reform. But could we have less of this rhetoric about his £5 billion package of disability benefit so-called reform being moral? There is nothing moral about cutting benefits for what may be up to 1 million people. This is not about morality. This is about the Treasury's wish to balance the country's books on the back of the most vulnerable and poor people in this society.
Mr. Speaker, she's a passionate advocate and has been for a long time on this issue, and I pay tribute to that. But as she rightly acknowledges, the current system is broken. And this is where I disagree with her. I think 1 in 8 young people, not in employment, training or education, that's 1 million young people. I think that's a moral issue, Mr. Speaker, because all the evidence suggests that someone in that situation at that stage of their life is going to find it incredibly difficult ever to get out of that level of dependency. That cuts across the opportunity and aspiration that's the root of my values and Labour values about how we take working people forward. So I do see it as a moral issue. I'm not going to turn away from that. I am genuinely shocked that 1 million people, young people, are in that position, and I'm not prepared to shrug my shoulders and walk past it.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.